I'm Tim the Nerd from the Chicago Sun-Times.
I'm Professor Aubrey from the Chicago Tribune.
And welcome to Friends Talking Nerdy. This week, we are going to be talking about the opinions of one Mr. Roger Ebert.
That's right. And it's getting to the point that people listening may not know who that is.
Which is sad, but on a different level, though, like we've mentioned before many times, how we consume our media today is so much different. But it is sad that people that specifically go to school to learn how to properly critique a movie don't get a chance to be listened to anymore. And some Joe Schmo who may work at a doggy daycare gets to talk about his opinions, and everybody will agree.
Right.
So we're going to be talking about Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert came to fame in the late 70s on a movie review TV show on PBS with his cohort from the Chicago Sun-Times, Gene Siskel, and ultimately became very popular to the point that they were able to take that TV show and spin it off into their own movie review show, commonly known as At the Movies.
That's right.
And for our generation, they both Siskel and Ebert were really the go-to voices we would go to for movie opinion. Now, it's important to have, when it comes to movies, people's opinion that you trust, whether it's in real life or not, because even more so today than it was even back in the 80s, it is a little bit of an investment to go to the movies, depending on where you are in the country, if it's only a corporate-run theater or an independent theater, and finding out from a trusted source that something may be good or something may be bad is not a bad thing, I think.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is the power that they had to shape the culture.
That is true. And there were times that it could be argued that they would push things on their show content-wise, in terms of movies people should check out that didn't necessarily deserve that push. And I can say this confidently because they were on the air for years and they talked about a lot of movies. And, when you have it would be like me talking about wrestling on the show. You have an interest, you're going to push that interest.
Right. Yeah.
So, it wasn't like a malicious thing or anything like that. But on the flip side, there were times to where both Siskel and Ebert, but in our case today, for our purposes, Roger Ebert, disliked movies that we ended up liking. Now, I think he would, if he were still around today, I think he would be the first to say that there's a difference between what he did as a critic and a person enjoying a movie. You can enjoy a movie that, in terms of how films are made, is still considered bad.
Sure.
The point here is not about saying he's wrong, I guess, but it is fun at times to have a trusted voice like this and question them. You don't want to parrot everything they say because then you are not putting in the thought yourself into whether you think a film is good or not.
Well, but you're doing it at different time periods, right? Presumably you're getting this opinion before you see the movie. So you don't have an opinion about the movie. So yes, you have to depend on the opinion of someone, or like the trailer for the movie.
Well, my point though is I think that by examining the past opinions of, in this case, an innocuous thing like a film review makes it to where you are being honest with yourself. It is easy to read a review and think, okay, I'm going to completely trust that review and not, at the end of the day, put your time into seeing whether that reviewer is right or wrong. And like I said, too, there may be points in terms of how movies are made that the movie critic is correct on stating is wrong, but that doesn't take away from your enjoyment as well. To me, I think exercises like this stimulate critical thinking. You don't, again, want to have a voice that you do trust be right on absolutely everything, because that's just not possible.
Right.
Yeah.
It is absolutely critical thinking to think about things like that.
Yeah, anyway, so what we wanted to do is bring up a list here of movies that Roger Ebert did not care for, and ones that, on the flip side, we did, and kind of talk about our reasons why. How about you dive into your first choice for our friends at home?
All right. So my first choice is going to be Fast Times at Ridgemont High. On several of these that I liked that he did not like, they are from my childhood. My opinion of the movies is colored by the fact that I saw it when I was 10, right? Like my feelings about the movies are going to be very different from his feelings about the movies. So, do I think that Fast Times at Ridgemont High is high art? No, but did I enjoy the film, which is what we were looking for? Like, did we enjoy a film that he did not like? So everybody knows Fast Times at Ridgemont High, surely. Have you seen it?
No.
Oh, really?
And you would think I would have by this point, written by Cameron Crowe. That was the first movie that he wrote. I believe it was Penelope Spheris who directed it, who would, I believe she, or is it Amy Heckerling? She may have had some. She may have directed the first Wayne's World, but I know Penelope Spheris was responsible for three great music documentaries called "The Decline of Western Civilization,"
Oh,
which detailed punk music, metal, and other things as well. But definitely familiar with the concept. Obviously, Spicoli, dude. Sean Penn, his first big role. Nicholas Coppola, his first role. You're like, who's Nicholas Coppola? Later dropped his uncle's surname. It became Nicolas Cage.
Wow, I didn't know they were related.
Yeah, there are a lot of Coppolas. There were a lot of Coppolas in Hollywood at that particular time. Talia Shire, Adrian from the Rocky movies. She's Francis Ford Coppola's sister.
Really?
Yep.
That was a very good role for somebody who came from a
Yeah.
big Italian family.
And speaking of that, you remember the movie Rushmore?
Oh yeah.
The lead in that film, Jason Schwartzman, is Talia Shire's son. So he's related to Francis Ford Coppola. That's his uncle.
Oh yeah, she.
Yeah, anyway, but Fast Times.
Yeah. So Fast Times, there's the great podcast that we were listening to last night or watching called That Held Up or That's Still Great or something like that.
It's called This Aged Great. I did do some research and found out that as of May of this year, their audio podcast ended up going the way of the dodo, but they created a YouTube channel. And what they've been doing, I guess, is not only splitting the older episodes of their podcast into little 10-minute clips on YouTube, they're going to be making some more stuff video-wise for YouTube.
Yeah, and it's great to have them talking about the movie while you're watching the movie. Like that's really nice. It's like MST in that way, which is fun.
I agree. Now, what about that soundtrack from Fast Times with the one Sammy Hagar?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was the height of hair band.
Hagar Mania.
Yeah, like as soon as you said Hagar, it started playing in my mind.
It makes me sick, though, finding out that he is a Trump supporter.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, and it gives new meaning, though, to like some of his songs because a selfish douchebag would be the one who would write, I can't drive 55.
Mm-hmm.
You don't tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I got a fancy car, pal. I pay your taxes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I never thought he was a good person. I heard those songs on the radio so much.
Yeah, he's corporate rock. He's the Applebee's of rock.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point where I liked his involvement with Van Halen, but even before the revelation that he had conservative political leanings, I just, for the past 15 years or so, I just stopped listening to those Van Halen songs. It like stopped working for me, unlike it did when I was a kid. They're one of the few bands I didn't listen to as much. I listened more to the David Lee Roth stuff.
His solo stuff.
No, the David Lee Roth era Van Halen.
Oh,
Like
okay.
Panama and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, ain't talking about love. But anyway, Fast Times. I'm sure at some point in time I will see it. It is weird. There are plenty of movies that I'm sure by the time I sit down and watch them, I'm going to enjoy them. But for whatever reason, it's just something. It's like something about them just makes me want to go to something else first.
I think you would really enjoy it, and I think you would be like, oh, about some things that you've heard in your life and don't understand why people are like, ha ha ha, or whatever, because you don't understand the reference, which is to Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Like, that is how pervasive that movie was.
All right. Speaking of pervasive, how about I go into my first choice?
Yes, please.
All right. This is a movie that came out in the late 90s. Have you seen The Usual Suspects?
Maybe.
Yeah, it starts off with guys in like a lineup, and ultimately you find out through an interview process with a detective played by Chaz Palminteri, and one of the people that was in the lineup played by Kevin Spacey, that they're looking for this guy by the name of Kaiser Soze. And the whole movie is just this back and forth question and answer period, but you go back in flashbacks and learn about this crime and all that, and you're determining who Kaiser Soze is, only to find out at the end of the movie that Kaiser Soze was actually the Kevin Spacey character.
Oh, wow.
That it was one of those realizations at the end, because what you ended up finding out was that little bits and pieces that the Kevin Spacey character played when he was pretending to be someone else were all based on observations on things he saw in the detective's office at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And the detective like finally put it together, but the Kevin Spacey character was already outside and making his escape. Overall, pretty solid movie. In terms of the people involved, we have Kevin Spacey, who we do have to put it out there on the legal side of things, hasn't really been found guilty of anything, but there's a lot of talk about what a bad person he is.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the director of the film, Bryan Singer, and some of the things that they said about Bryan Singer would make Kevin Spacey look like a saint.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I get if that would be something that would stop people from watching that movie, but for the story alone, for it being a little crime drama with a twist ending, I thought it was pretty good. Was it like The Sixth Sense in terms of like, oh my God, in terms of the revelation? No, it wasn't, but still a pretty solid movie, and I was surprised that this was one that he didn't really care for.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, any thoughts on Bryan Singer, Kevin Spacey, The Usual Suspects, or anything like that?
Well, I don't think I still don't know if I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really have anything to say about it.
So that would be a no. How about you dive into your next choice then?
Okay. My next choice is Saving Silverman, a movie that I really liked until Russell Brand went.
Cuckoo Bananas.
Yeah. He's turned into a conservative pundit who says all kinds of just ridiculously insane things, like very Trumpy. He's in this movie. It's his first movie role. Like, he had been on MTV for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but this was his first movie, and he was great in it. It was like he played himself. Like, that's who he plays in movies, is himself, or at least what the image that he wants to portray, because the characters are just like he acts in his when he's not acting.
Yeah, I don't take him for someone that could be able to tackle Macbeth.
No.
You know.
No, for sure not. So there's that part that I liked, and it's basically somebody who has a girlfriend that none of his friends like, who is constantly breaking up with him, and then they get back together, and the friends really, really hate her, and the guy really, really loves her, and she breaks up with him. And so it's the story of how the friends try to get the roommate to feel better so he doesn't go back to his girlfriend.
Oh man, I've never seen it.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, and Jason Segel's in it. I know. He was in one of those clips from that YouTube channel that we just mentioned, where he dropped the towel
Right.
and showed his wing wang,
Yeah.
or as my grandma used to say, tallywhacker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that is not one that really struck my fancy as like I got to see it.
Yeah. And again, these are like bubblegum movies, if anything. They're like guilty secrets kind of movies.
Really, what they are, I think and I don't think I'm too far off the base here. Them and the Judd, like the Saving Silverman and like the Judd Apatow movies are better made Kevin Smith films.
Interesting.
You know, just made with a more filmmaker lens and not just plant a camera in one spot and one spot only, and shoot it like a play. But maybe one day I'll check it out. But how about I dive into my next choice? And I know you have not seen this one.
Okay. Well, I won't have much to say about it then, will
No,
I?
no, but
Meow.
yeah, good girl. Well, this movie was so bad that I got to read a specific quote that Roger Ebert said. This movie doesn't scrape the bottom of the barrel. This movie isn't the bottom of the barrel. This movie isn't below the bottom of the barrel. This movie doesn't deserve to be mentioned in the same sentence with barrels. Freddy Got Fingered. The 2001 Tom Green classic that I saw twice in theaters, so I think I more than doubled that film's gross output the week it came out. Starring and directed, and I believe written by Tom Green, it is one of the most bizarre motion pictures ever put to screen, and I say this as a fan of the Monkees movie Head.
Right.
There's a scene where Tom Green is driving along and he sees a horse studding farm and horse's cocks makes an appearance and he stops the car in mid-traffic, runs onto the farm, grabs the horse's dick, starts shaking and goes, "I'm a farmer, Daddy. I'm a farmer, Daddy."
Whoa.
Yeah. He's a comic book creator, wants to be an animator, but his father, squashes his dreams, but he tries to continue to make it. Like there's one scene to where he's told to be like the animals. So the way he decides he wants to be like an animal is when he sees a deer that was hit by a car in the middle of the road that's dead. He takes off its skin and wears its skin and then promptly gets hit by a semi. Yeah. He also has a handicapped girlfriend in the movie who is into being caned in her knees because she can't feel anything, but apparently it gets her off.
Uh-huh.
It's like, yeah, it's not a movie you're going to see at like a little church potluck, during the summer or something like that. This is a movie that I would say
Pretty intense.
Pretty intense. It's not for everybody in any way, shape, or form, but I just love the fact that it was made. I really do. It's like something that awful should give anybody hope that you have a shot.
Making one movie.
At doing something to get noticed creatively. If Freddy Got Fingered can make it to theaters, like keep doing your podcast, people.
Right.
Yeah, you just can't stop. And like to Roger Ebert's point, like he's not wrong about how bad this movie is. He's not. And his description of it, not, don't compare it to a barrel, dead on. Dead on. But there's still a charm to this movie that won me over. That's why I saw it in theaters twice. Probably the only person in the world who can say that, apart from maybe Tom Green's family.
I certainly didn't see it, so obviously it didn't get my...
Yeah, well, you were in law school. I was watching Freddy Got Fingered. So, anyway, how about you dive into your next choice?
Okay, my next choice is Caligula. And I have to read what he said about it. Caligula is sickening, utterly worthless, shameful trash. If it is not one of the worst films I have ever seen, that makes it all the more shameful. People with talent allowed themselves to participate in this travesty. Disgusted and unspeakably depressed, I walked out of the film after 2 hours of its 170-minute length. That was on Saturday night, as a line of hundreds of people stretched down Lincoln Avenue, waiting to pay $7.50 apiece to become eyewitnesses to shame. I wanted to tell them. What did I want to tell them? What I'm telling you now, that this film is not only garbage on an artistic level, but that it is also garbage on the crude and base level where it no doubt hopes to find its audience. Caligula is not good art. It is not good cinema. It is not good porn.
Yeah, this was, while I have not seen it myself, I'm definitely familiar with the history behind that film. I believe that is Helen Mirren's first big American role. She's in that movie. Roddy McDowall is as well, but it was produced by Bob Guccione from Penthouse, and there was a version of the movie that was sent into theaters, and then there was a version of the movie that had hardcore sex in it as well.
Yes.
It showed that you have to know your audience at the end of the day. Like, people that were possibly interested in watching a Roman period piece were not there for the porn, and the people there for the porn were not there for the Roman period piece.
Right. It's a very, very narrow segment of the population that's to both.
Yeah, you're not going to have a $150 million budget for porn. I mean, that might be interesting, but maybe not good for the whole family.
And just imagine people just saw the front, the poster, which I think was like a Roman coin, that they were like, oh, it's a documentary about Rome. Let's go see it.
You know, it must be good. It's old. All right. Any other thoughts on Caligula? Any good sex scenes in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it. Did you say hardcore sex? I wouldn't call it hardcore sex. It's more just that they showed people having sex.
Yeah. No, like, Roman arching jizz or anything.
No, I mean, it's similar to the Sylvester Stallone one because they're contemporaries.
Yeah. Hey, yo.
But the production value is amazing. It's a beautiful film. So I don't understand what he's saying. It's not art.
Well, at the end of the day, cocaine is a hell of a drug. How about I go on to my next choice?
Do it.
This was a movie that I saw in theaters as kind of a why not. It was at the Dollar Theater when we still had those in Grand Rapids. And the other choices they had didn't really interest me. So I thought, why not? Here's $1. I'll sit in the back near the exit if it's really, really bad. Spice World. The Spice Girls movie. I saw that in theaters.
How was it?
Surprisingly fun. I say fun, not good, fun, because I really do get the impression that the Spice Girls themselves knew that they weren't going to, make the greatest, music movie in history. And yes, for anybody out there, it is the Spice Girls version of A Hard Day's Night, essentially.
Yeah.
And they do even have that reporters interviewing the women, which is similar to the reporters interviewing the Beatles in A Hard Day's Night. And so there are definitely some similarities at the very least.
Some homage.
Yes. But like, one of my favorite scenes from the film, it's like they're on the traditional like London bus, the red buses, the double-decker things, and they're driving. For some reason, they have to escape somebody, but oh no, the London Bridge is rising up. How are they going to get over? And it's Posh Spice driving as she goes, I know what we'll do. And then she puts her foot on the gas, and then it cuts to a model, and there's a human hand holding the bus that jumps it over the bridge. And then it cuts back to the girls as if they've successfully made the jump. And I laughed my ass off like that. It's like they got it. They knew they weren't going to make a big, huge artistic piece. So they had a lot of fun goofing around.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like, did it make me a Spice Girls fan? It did not. But for the hour and a half that I sat in that theater, I thought it was fun, not good. It's not high art, and I get why, as his job as a film critic, he would say it's not a good film. I get his points, but again, as just an audience member, sometimes even the worst of films can still be fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially for $1. And, bringing up the dollar theater, I mean, whoa, you could see a movie in a theater for $1?
You,
They made all of their money on the concessions.
Yeah, and it was those types of theaters as well, the cheaper theaters that allowed the ability, to say, why not? I mean, if a movie ticket's $9, yeah, for some people in this town, maybe that's not that big of a deal, but for some people, $9 or more for a ticket is something to consider, especially whether you don't know if it's necessarily good or bad or not. But if it's $1, you're going to be like, why not? What's the worst that could happen?
I think movies are more like $15 these days.
$9 probably for like a matinee or something,
Maybe.
or senior citizen discount, but it's up there. It's up there. But any thoughts on the Spice Girls?
Well, I love the Spice Girls for their campiness, but I never really got into their music beyond.
Tell me what you want. What you really,
I
really
really
want.
want. I'll tell you what I want. What I really want. I wanna.
All right. How about you dive into your next one before we lose it?
Okay. My next one is Cannonball Run. The Cannonball Run, actually, is what it was called. It had the.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to include. So this is a movie about Burt Reynolds and Sally Field.
No, that was Smoking
Bandit.
Dom DeLuise was his sidekick in this movie. And they had a lot of celebrity drivers. This was actually Jackie Chan's first American movie. And at the end of the Cannonball Run, during the credits, you remember they had like the bloopers?
Uh-huh.
Jackie Chan, after that, for the rest of his movies, ended up having the bloopers because of the Cannonball Run. So if you watched Rush Hour and saw the bloopers in the credit, you think Cannonball Run.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So it was the one about the race, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had all these different characters and their different cars, and there's, mayhem ensues. And it's just, sort of like a French farce and very cute.
Yeah, it's not meant to be high art. Like, I think some people were disappointed in Burt Reynolds in that point in his career for kind of going the comedy route, because he did have his start in more serious fare. Like, even though people have a lot of laughs about Deliverance, it was a drama and meant to be a drama at that particular point. And of course, he had a start in Westerns on televisions and stuff like that. But kind of like Adam West in the Batman TV show, I think over time, people have come to have a much better reception of Smoking a Bandit and a Cannonball Run because they get what he was going for. Just for silly, cheap laughs. What's wrong with having a pie in a face type of gag happen,
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what he enjoyed more. Like, I could imagine enjoying doing comedy more than doing dramatic roles like in Deliverance. Like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. Squeal would mean so much different in a comedy, but anyway.
Yep.
So, any other thoughts on the Cannonball Run?
No, it was fun and cute.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of that, how about I go on to my next one?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because you're fun and cute?
Well, we know this. We have more than 300 episodes to show this to the people at home. But my next choice, kind of a sentimental favorite for me, and I can understand why Roger Ebert wasn't necessarily a fan. He had more of his critic hat on, but Tommy Boy.
Whoa.
Chris Farley, David Spade, their first movie together. And yeah, is it the greatest comedy ever made? Of course not. But more than anything, this film is carried by Chris Farley and somewhat to a lesser extent David Spade, just their personalities. It's like a comedy version of a Schwarzenegger movie from the 80s, to where it's just going off of his charisma more than anything else. And like, we lost Chris Farley way too soon.
Oh, definitely.
Like, I remember in Grand Rapids, I was at the public library on the internet on a GeoCities chat room
Ah.
when somebody popped up with, "Oh no, they just found out Chris Farley is dead," and like I immediately just like stood up and had to walk home, and just like he was so funny. Like the two funniest things he did on Saturday Night Live for me were, one, the sketch, the Chris Farley show, where he interviewed Paul McCartney and was like, "Do you remember that time when you're in the Beatles and they said you were dead? Was that true?"
Is that true?
There was that one, and then they had this weird little sketch to where they showed behind the scenes of a coffee commercial, and like somebody said, "Do you realize that what you're drinking is decaf?" And Chris Farley's like, at the time, he's like smiling, but then once the person says, "You're drinking decaf," his face turns angry. He's like, "What? You fed me decaf," and he throws the table over.
Because he's like a prima donna commercial maker.
It was a documentary showing bloopers from that. I mean,
Oh, that was the blooper.
that was yeah, because you know what coffee would you want to buy to where the customer that just drank it wants to fight the person in the commercial, flipped it over, his wife's holding it back, and the chef's having to hit him with a pan to get him to calm down. I mean, he was.
The one I loved was the Patrick Swayze
Chippendale.
Chippendales one. Yeah. Amazing. It was amazing. Like, to embrace, I think, who his body in a funny way that wasn't that, it didn't feel degrading. It felt like he was really free and autonomous in his body.
Well,
I'm sure he wasn't, and I'm sure he
yeah.
struggled with those things, and I'm sure, but like as somebody watching it, if that's what I thought about him, then that was good, right?
Yeah, there were. I'm only hesitant here because there have been interviews in the past with some of his SNL castmates at the time that do say that they feel that sketch may have been the start of the snowball going down the hill that led to his drug dependency becoming what ultimately took his life.
Really? How so?
They felt that it ultimately became a situation where people were not laughing with him, they were laughing at him. And he took it to heart.
Mm.
Which
At least he perceived that.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying, is that the perceptions of the audience and the perceptions of the actor can miss each other entirely.
And that's what I was going to say as well. I don't want to bring this up to be like, how dare you like that? Because yeah, you and because I laughed my ass off when I saw that sketch, the first time, and in plenty of times since that I've seen it. We were just the audience, and yeah, him putting on that performance was funny as hell. It's just a sad footnote, really, to find out that it was something that really did affect him. Also, I forgot probably my absolute favorite SNL commercial. It's Adam Sandler and Chris Farley are walking into an empty house. They're supposed to be house sitting. They go to the backyard. There's a pool, and the pool's not filled with water. And Chris Farley's like, "This place is a dump." And Adam Sandler's like, "Watch this." Turns on the water. The pool magically transforms into a full pool, and then out of the water are a bunch of muscled up guys because it's a Schmidt's Gay commercial. If you like a good beer and you're gay, try Schmidt's Gay.
That's kind of silly, I guess.
It was making fun of beer commercials. It was one of those deals like if you it kind of flipped the script on beer commercials, because there have been plenty of beer commercials that followed that same format, with guys going into a place and then women in bikinis pop up, and we're just supposed to accept that. And I felt that kind of flipped the script on it to show how silly commercials can be overall and how over sexualized they can be.
Oh, definitely. They definitely are. I used to love those commercial shows where they showed all the terrible commercials, or the commercials with people hurting themselves, or the blooper reels from commercials, and sort of all that stuff. I like those kinds of things.
Mhm.
Like I like Fail Army now.
That you do. That you do. Well, do you have anything else you would like to say about Tommy Boy, or would you like to dive into your last choice?
I will tell you my last choice.
All right.
It is Flash Dance.
Never saw it.
It's good. You should watch it. I don't know. It should be on that podcast. Did it hold up or whatever? What's it called?
I love how you just at the last minute put me on the spot.
It's really good.
This age, great.
This age grade, yes. This movie should be done on this age grade. I should send them a letter or something.
Dear this age grade people.
Please help us by talking about this movie. I saw it when I was 10 or 11, probably. And it's a story of a working class woman who is a welder and a sex worker in the evening as a dancer. And she wanted to be a dancer, like a legit dancer, not a sex related dancer. So it's the story of her training, and it's got lots of montages and like music, maniac, that one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the rest of the song. All I know is maniac, maniac. The person who played the female lead, I do not remember their name.
I believe it's Jennifer Beals.
Yes, it is. It's Jennifer Beals. And Jennifer Beals went on to be the lead in The L Word and was smoking in that TV show.
All right. The two things I've never seen.
You should see.
Well, and as we've talked about on a previous episode, Flashdance is one of those movies that came out in the 80s, along with like stuff like Purple Rain, that were kind of tailor-made for the MTV audience.
Right.
Because they used essentially scenes from the film ended up becoming the videos and part of the promotion. And they showed... I don't think there is anything necessarily wrong with like cross-promoting if it's done in an organic way. It's like people that complain about like product placement, as long as they're not like, I'm going to take a drink of this polar water. Do you know polar water is made with that type of thing? If they're just using a product, like
the old radio commercials where they'd be like, I'm having a cup of coffee. Really? What kind of coffee are you having?
It hits my Q zone. Doctors recommend.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
That I do.
Where it was purposefully, you were confused as to whether it was news and sort of objective analysis or a paid commercial.
Yeah. And we'll get more on that topic later, but how about I dive into my last film?
Yes, please.
All right, this is a film that came out in the early 2000s. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I remember really enjoying it. It was directed by Danny DeVito, starring Robin Williams and Ed Norton, called Death to Smoochie. Do you remember that one?
I don't think I saw it.
Robin Williams played a kid show host who was fired, and Edward Norton was his replacement and played Smoochie the rhinoceros, and Robin Williams ends up trying to get Smoochie killed.
Whoa.
It's a dark comedy. This was right around the time where Robin Williams kind of started doing some more obscure stuff or different stuff. He was taking on some darker roles, like he did 1 Hour Photo around this time as well, where he was actually the villain of the film. So if you're interested in seeing essentially like the range of Robin Williams, like this is one great film to check out. And he has a mean streak in the film too, which Robin Williams being mean as a character it brings on the laughs in a lot of unexpected ways. Now, I can understand again why Roger Ebert would say not a good film. It does have its flaws, but for the type of humor that it had for me, it worked. And it's been a while since I've seen it, and at this point, I think I'll probably find a way to watch it again, depending on where it's at. But I always love those dark, sarcastic films. Like Robin Williams too did work with his friend Bobcat Goldthwait. Ken
Mm-hmm.
Goldthwait directed him in the movie called World's Greatest Dad. And that movie was about Robin Williams was an English teacher. His son was a high schooler and whatnot, but just kind of a regular kid. But also loved autoerotic asphyxiation.
Yeah.
And his son ended up dying, but Robin Williams ended up faking a journal that his son wrote to literary acclaim. But then at the end of the movie, he got caught, and essentially the end of the movie is him telling everybody to go fuck themselves. Another dark comedy, but it was an interesting period in Robin Williams' career because, again, he wasn't going for the typical, what we at that particular time in the early 2000s thought was a typical Robin Williams film. Whether it's the serious comedy or Good Morning Vietnam or Good Will Hunting, or whether it was your, Mrs. Doubtfire or whatever. Much different than those.
Mm-hmm.
So, from the looks of it, sounds like it's one you had not seen.
Nope. Hadn't seen that one.
Yeah, knowing your sense of humor, I could probably say it would probably not be your thing, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, you never know with me, really.
Yeah.
Sometimes I like some weird stuff, like Jason Statham.
Yeah, I know. All right. So again, at the end of the day here, folks, I think Mr. Ebert would have been the first one to say enjoyment of the film is irrelevant to the critique of the film. You can understand where he came from as a film critic. He was talking about, he understood how films were made, in terms of the types of lenses that the camera operators had to use, in terms of the settings. I mean, he wrote his own film, Revenge of the Valley of the Dolls, or Return to the Valley of the Dolls.
Uh-huh.
He wrote that sequel. So,
wow.
Yeah, so not a classy film either. So he wrote a bad film.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be critical of the voices that you do respect at the end of the day. And it is okay to say, even for something as innocuous as a film critic, to say, I think this film critic was wrong in their opinion.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, you don't want to be a parrot, really, because being a parrot will get you caught at some point. People will, if like all you watch are like Kevin Smith films and that's how all your jokes come out, and then somebody watches a Kevin Smith film, they're like, well, we know where Tim gets his jokes. That happened to
me. Oh, really?
Yeah. Anyway, so any other thoughts on Roger Ebert?
No, I remember watching him. He was a cool guy.
Yeah. And believe it or not, there are plenty of Siskel and Ebert at the Movies videos on YouTube. So definitely recommend if you have some spare time and you were from our generation. It's a nice trip down memory lane.
Fun.
All right. So hang tight, folks. We're going to let one of our friends in the podcasting world talk about their show. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby and get ourselves a drink.
Mm-hmm. Hey man, what's your bacon?
You gotta tell everybody what that means first.
It's that extra side topping or main course in life that makes everything about your day even better.
Whether it's movies, music, cooking, paranormal, video games, whatever it is that helps you unwind, maybe even get a little bit inspired. We talk to hot new bands.
We are Felicity.
Hey, this is Bradley from Emerosa.
TV personalities.
Hi, my name is Rachel Pizzolatto.
Hi, my name is Patty Magley.
Wrestling personalities.
Hi, everybody. I am Eric Bischoff. WWE Hall of Famer. Godfather here.
Actors.
This is Sean Kanan. Thank you for joining us.
Fellow podcasters.
Emo Social Club.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dave Schrader. Pretty much any like-minded creative across all facets of the entertainment industry.
You can check out Bacon Is My Podcast on all streaming platforms, as well as the Strangerhood TV YouTube channel. New episodes dropping every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Listen in when we find the answer to the question,
what's your bacon?
All right, welcome back, everybody. Before we wrap up this week, did want to talk about something that is in the news currently as we record this. When the episode finally comes out, we'll probably have a little more information as to what's going on. But Comcast has announced that they are spinning off a majority of their cable networks, like Sci-Fi, the USA Network, plus CNBC and MSNBC, into their own company. And that kind of has two little angles that I think we can have a little bit of a conversation with. I mean, one, the MSNBC thing is what's MSNBC going to look like when they no longer have access to the reporters and the tools of NBC News?
Well, and the footage. I mean, they just used all the footage that NBC generates in making their news reels, right?
Well, it's still possible. I mean, you do see on various news sources that, they will have like, here's a clip from CNN and they'll have like a CNN clip on the top, but you're watching it on like ABC News.
Right.
So it would be possible to do that, but in terms of the infrastructure, people in the behind the scenes making calls, doing whatever, researching stories, like what does MSNBC look like afterwards? And that's not even taking into account a recent controversy. Again, as we record this, it was revealed by one Joe Scarborough, the host of The Morning Show on MSNBC, one of their most popular shows, that this person who, since 2016, was stating that Donald Trump was the scourge of the earth, him and his co-host / wife, Mika Brzezinski, ended up going to Mar-a-Lago and bended the knee.
Mm-hmm.
And once they released that news, they were somehow surprised that their audience of center-ish leaning people would not be would be happy with that. Their audience cratered really fast. I don't know what they expected with that, because they're not reporters. Like a reporter should have that communication going with somebody, whether they agree with them or not, because their job is to report on the news, whereas Morning Joe is commenting on the news. You don't have to have a relationship with a political figure to comment on them. It can help in terms of having them on the show and increasing ratings and all that stuff. But, if you are trying to sell a viewpoint that politician A is not doing a good job, and all of a sudden you say, well, maybe we don't think so. Maybe we do want to have continued talks with them. Like, what did they expect,
Right. Well, it sounds very hypocritical. And, there's some pictures, like there's one of RFK Jr. who was having dinner with Trump and they were all eating McDonald's. And knowing that RFK Jr. is very health conscious and was going to get, appointed to the Department of Health and Human Services, or the larger umbrella.
Yeah.
I can't remember at the moment.
No, Health and Human Services, because it controlled like the FDA and stuff like that. Scary thoughts. But more than anything, he was probably feeding his brainworm,
Yeah, exactly. He was feeding his brainworm. But anyway, so in the picture, you just see his face like he knows he's been caught. He is bending the knee. He is eating McDonald's to not insult Trump and to pay homage to Trump. And you just see him looking at the camera like, what have I done? How do I get out of this?
Yeah, with Grandpa Kennedy, the father of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Teddy Kennedy, and stuff like that, with his connections to the mob, he is now no longer the worst Kennedy. Ted Kennedy, with the Chappaquiddick situation where the woman died in his car that drove into the lake, and he somehow survived but didn't tell people for a while. He's not the worst Kennedy. Think of the Skakel, the cousin of the Kennedys in the 90s who went to prison for murder.
Whoa.
Yeah, he's no longer the worst Kennedy. What a anyway, it at the end of the day, it's definitely going to change how progressives get their news, but I also think it might be a good thing as well, because it seemed like too many progressives thought MSNBC was the only way to get their ideas out into the world, and I think that is proven hilariously wrong. So if MSNBC goes the way of the dodo, I'm kind of for that at this point.
Yeah, I think it's good for the progressive, because it's not progressive.
It's center right at the very most, and a very mostly center, a little bit right.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, and then you have Rachel Maddow.
But again, though, what is she really? She has some progressive ideas, of course. I'm not saying she doesn't have some ideas that I don't believe in and support, but, I brought up the Christie issue before, where she spent like weeks talking about a bridge closure scandal that he was involved in, that his administration was involved in, which, for like local regional news, I think would be a perfect type of story to talk about. But did I need to hear that when I was living in Sacramento, California? Nah.
Well, he was running for president.
He was not running for president at that time.
Oh.
It was an open secret that he was considering it. He was making all the trips to the right places, like Iowa and stuff like that, because there's a whole rigmarole of public things you have to do to show that you're interested in starting that journey to become president without stating you're becoming president first.
Right, because you need to get people's money, but you can't commit until you have enough money.
Yeah. So I'm sure she'll find something. She's already reduced her output from a weekly show to a once a week thing anyway. So it's certainly, I could see her doing something like starting a podcast and, doing like what Conan O'Brien has done in terms of getting a deal with like Sirius XM.
Yeah.
Having like a Rachel Maddow channel or something like that. But in terms of like how progressives get their news, like progressives need to, one, start finding other sources, and two, really push the legitimate good sources of information out there in terms of the new media. If there are podcasts that you like that are saying the right things, then, push it out there so people will know. Because, you don't really hear that with progressive stuff. It's one thing to where the conservatives do have an advantage. They're taking advantage of how people are getting their information these days, more so than the Democrats, the progressives.
Yeah.
But on the bigger picture, what this story kind of tells too is the fact that Comcast is essentially cutting the cable on cable.
Right.
And
all those cable subscribers out there better figure out what you're doing.
Yeah, because there could be a day to where companies will say, what, it doesn't make financial sense to have a cable channel when I could have a streaming option, because the cable companies are still going to get their money because of how, via broadband internet, the cable signal's getting to, from point A to point B. And yeah, like TV as we know it, like I think this, for people that grew up in the cable generation, like you and I, like this right here is the thing that I think and I could be wrong, who knows? I've been wrong on plenty of things, but I think this is going to be the start of the rapid change. Like I think cable and regular TV has been in a dying state, but still limping along. The fact that NBC is selling these off, things are going to look a lot different 10 years from now.
Yeah, it's sort of like what happened with the newspapers and this idea of new media, right? You've got to change. The media has got to change to take advantage of the technology, which means there are losers. Whenever there's a shift, there are always winners and always losers. And so the losers have been holding on to cable. And now that may be no longer a investment.
Yeah. And now, to be clear as well, I mean, and I think I told you about this when I first brought up this topic to you, this could also be just a situation to where it's kind of an accounting move as well. In terms of NBC, the Comcast Universal as a whole can write this off into another company, but the person they're putting in place as the leader of that company is also a board member of Comcast Universal as well. So it's like, I'm sure they will probably still have some footprint with those cable networks and still probably have some access to like USA Network shows appearing on the Peacock app or something like that. But it's just a lot of questions at this point going forward as to what it's going to mean for the future. And on the one hand, it is a little scary because change can be difficult and change can just be scary, to say it again. But on the flip side, I think one benefit of growing older that I've enjoyed is seeing the new things that come along. I don't want to be so stuck in the past that I'm going to say, I don't want to work on a computer or something that will allow me to create a manuscript of something that I can change and not have to use whiteout to make those changes and then only print it once it's finally done.
Yep.
You have to, it's like you have to embrace change But on the flip
Remember typing paper? That thin paper. It was hard to separate, hard to stick in the typewriter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to go back to that. And do you know who created Whiteout?
Who?
Mike Nesmith's mother.
Oh.
From the Monkees.
Interesting.
Yeah, his mother created it, and that's the reason why after, when she passed away, he didn't have to take part in any sort of Monkees reunions unless he wanted to after that fact, which he didn't for the longest time, but that's a different story for a different day. But anyway, times, they are a-changing, to quote Mr. Zimmerman.
Indeed.
Any other thoughts you want to tell our friends at home?
Nope.
All right. You're like, let's get this over with. I want the weekend to happen, man. All right. Each Monday, we'll have something in this podcasting space to entertain your ear holes. Until we meet again, we bid you adieu.
So long.
And the balcony is closed. Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy
on YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Goodbye, darling.